years. This fall will be 2 years since I've worked, so it's been about 1.5 years since I've stepped foot on a set. It's kind of nerve-wracking to be back, but I know that I'm...
After the disastrous fallout from Disney's Snow White remake, Rachel Zegler's career began collapsing in ways no one could have predicted. Once hailed as Disney's shining new princess and the face of a billion-dollar franchise, she quickly found herself at the center of one of the biggest entertainment embarrassments in recent memory. Insiders say that after the backlash and box office failure, she quietly slipped away from Hollywood, retreating to New York City where she was seen traveling by local subways, something unimaginable for a Disney star who had once been living the glamorous red carpet lifestyle. The sight of her hiding from cameras, blending into everyday commuters, painted a heartbreaking picture of how quickly things had turned against her. The movie itself became an international symbol of disappointment. When Snow White finally hit theaters, it was expected to dominate the box office and revive the brand, but the exact opposite happened. Within days, social media platforms were swamped with pictures and videos of completely empty theaters. By its fourth weekend, cinemas had already begun pulling it early to free up space for movies that audiences were actually excited to watch. Analysts reported a jaw-dropping 66% collapse in its second weekend alone, a statistic that marked one of the steepest declines in Disney history. With a $250 million production budget, not even counting marketing costs, the film struggled to crawl past just $143 million globally. Critics weren't any kinder either. Snow White sank to the bottom of the charts, barely clinging to a weak 6/10 score on IMDb. But the humiliation did not stop there. Viral TikToks started flooding the internet of moviegoers showing up to screenings only to realize they were the sole audience members. In one now famous clip, a fan filmed herself sitting in a massive, dark theater with every seat empty but hers. Reports from box office trackers confirmed the nightmare. In some locations, entire showings sold fewer than 3 tickets. By mid-April 2025, the collapse had become undeniable. Theaters began pulling Snow White at record speed, with daily averages dropping to a shocking $53 per theater, a number so low that owners had no justification to keep the movie running. At the same time, rival blockbusters like Minecraft and Captain America: Brave New World were packing theaters full, only highlighting how far Disney's Princess reboot had fallen. Even Disney's global reach couldn't save the project. In China, despite a massive marketing blitz plastering posters across cities, audiences simply stayed home. One Shanghai reporter revealed that his IMAX screening had just 5 people in total, including himself and a friend, even though promotional material had been pushed aggressively in his own apartment complex. The contrast between the hype and the actual turnout made headlines worldwide. And yet, perhaps the most damaging blow came not from critics, fans, or analysts, but from Rachel Zegler herself. In a bizarre attempt to go viral, she filmed a TikTok sitting all alone inside one of the nearly empty theaters, captioning it as if it were a joke. But the stunt backfired spectacularly, as the clip quickly became symbolic of the entire disaster. A star who once dreamed of ruling Disney's fairytale kingdom now reduced to mocking her own failing movie in front of a worldwide audience. Rachel Zegler has become one of the most controversial figures in Hollywood today, and the reasons for her sudden fall from grace are impossible to ignore. Once positioned as Disney's newest fairytale princess, she is now being described as a liability that major studios want to avoid. Her career took a sharp turn during the Snow White press tour, where she made a series of political remarks that alienated a huge portion of the audience. What was supposed to be a publicity campaign for a billion-dollar movie ended up becoming a public relations disaster. Instead of building excitement for the film, Rachel's words created division and backlash, and many insiders believe this has left her Hollywood future hanging by a thread. Reports from inside the industry suggest that executives at major studios have started to quietly reconsider casting her in upcoming projects. Sources even described her as high risk, noting that her public behavior, including emotional outbursts, interviews filled with hostility, and outspoken political commentary, has overshadowed her actual acting. What should have been her breakout role has instead become a warning sign for companies who do not want controversy attached to their brands. The collapse of Snow White is not just another box office flop, it has quickly become symbolic of something much larger. Disney had banked heavily on its live-action remake strategy, pouring hundreds of millions into films designed to reintroduce beloved classics to modern audiences. But instead of success, Snow White has been branded by many as the biggest flop in Hollywood history. Insiders originally hoped losses would be contained to around $115 million, but with the final global gross stalling at just $195 million against a $250 million budget, estimates now suggest Disney could lose close to $145 million. This financial disaster has reportedly shaken Disney's entire approach to filmmaking. Analysts say the company may now be rethinking its future slate of woke remakes, which have already faced growing criticism from audiences who feel that beloved classics are being rewritten for political purposes rather than entertainment. The backlash has been so strong that some sources claim other planned projects are now on hold, or even quietly cancelled, as Disney tries to stop the bleeding. Even CEO Bob Iger was forced to address the controversy when asked directly about Disney being called too woke. In a recent interview, he awkwardly admitted that he doesn't even know what the term means anymore. "I don't really like the term woke because I think it's an umbrella term, and I'm not 100% sure I even know what it means," he explained. Still, his comments did little to calm critics. While Iger insisted Disney's goal is simply to entertain audiences while having a positive impact, the reality is that audiences are voting with their wallets, and right now, they're walking away. What began as one actress's press tour meltdown has now snowballed into a full-blown crisis, not just for Rachel Zegler's career, but for Disney's long-term strategy. For many, Snow White is no longer just a movie, it's the cautionary tale of how arrogance, politics, and poor creative decisions can sink even the most powerful studio in Hollywood. Disney has long promoted itself as the world's premier storyteller, a company dedicated to entertaining audiences while spreading a message of hope and positivity. CEO Bob Iger has repeatedly reinforced this mission, claiming that Disney's first responsibility is always to entertain, while at the same time striving to make a positive impact on culture. Yet, after the humiliating disaster of Snow White, the company's words seem hollow compared to its actions. In private, Disney has been scrambling. According to insiders, one of the clearest signs of panic came when executives quietly pressed pause on their next big project, Tangled. This wasn't just another remake. Tangled was set to be the most expensive live-action adaptation in Disney's history, with a budget so massive it was rumored to surpass even the $250 million price tag of Snow White. The decision to pull the plug so abruptly suggests that Disney no longer has faith in the very formula that was once its billion-dollar safety net. And while the corporate fallout has been staggering, much of the blame continues to circle back to one individual, Rachel Zegler. What was supposed to be her star-making role as Disney's new princess has instead become a career-destroying nightmare. Even before the movie collapsed at the box office, industry insiders were already sounding alarms about Rachel's public image. Her behavior during the Snow White press tour was described as arrogant, combative, and polarizing. She openly mocked the original 1937 classic, dismissed its love story as weird, and ridiculed the prince as a stalker, statements that enraged fans of the beloved fairytale. Instead of generating excitement, Rachel's interviews created a wall of hostility between Disney and its own audience. For many viewers, she didn't just ruin her own reputation, she tainted the magic of the brand itself. When the film finally hit theaters, the backlash was immediate and merciless. Social media exploded with videos of empty cinemas, with fans gleefully documenting their solo viewings in auditoriums meant to seat hundreds. By its second weekend, Snow White had collapsed with a 66% drop in revenue, and theaters began pulling it en masse. Globally, the film sputtered out at just $195 million, far below its colossal budget and marketing spend. Disney's losses soared to an estimated $145 million, making it one of the worst financial disasters in modern Hollywood history. For Rachel, the humiliation was even greater. Her name became synonymous with the flop, and her career, once filled with limitless potential, suddenly looked radioactive. Behind the scenes, the tension was just as toxic. Reports claim Rachel clashed repeatedly with co-stars and crew, often attempting to assert control over creative decisions about how Snow White should be portrayed. Gal Gadot, who played the evil queen, allegedly grew frustrated with Rachel's domineering conduct and eventually refused to defend her in public. Disney executives reportedly pressured Gadot to support Rachel during the PR meltdown, but she declined, recognizing the damage it could cause to her own reputation. Insiders even describe one confrontation in which Gadot bluntly told Rachel that she alone was responsible for the movie's catastrophic reception. These stories only deepened the public perception that Rachel wasn't just unlucky, she was the architect of her own downfall. The consequences for Disney are potentially even more severe. For years, the company relied on live-action remakes as an easy box office strategy, recycling its animated classics into billion-dollar hits. But with Snow White's implosion, that entire strategy may now be collapsing. Projects like Tangled, which once seemed like guaranteed successes, are suddenly viewed as dangerous financial gambles. Investors are nervous, audiences are skeptical, and the studio's once unstoppable remake machine is grinding to a halt. As for Rachel Zegler, the fallout has been personally devastating. Sources close to her describe her as being in full emotional breakdown, overwhelmed by the non-stop criticism and online trolling. Some even claim she may be seeking therapy to cope with the sheer scale of the backlash. Meanwhile, her co-stars and collaborators are quietly distancing themselves, wary of being dragged down with her. What was once marketed as the rise of Disney's newest princess has instead turned into the collapse of a career and the unraveling of a billion-dollar corporate strategy. In the end, the story of Snow White is no longer just about a failed movie, it has become a cautionary tale for Hollywood itself. It shows how arrogance, poor decisions, and misplaced priorities can turn a fairy tale into a nightmare, and how quickly the dream of stardom can crumble when a studio loses sight of what audiences truly want. Simple, timeless entertainment in stark contrast to her co-star Andrew Burnap, who reportedly poured immense dedication into his performance. Rachel Zegler seemed almost dismissive of the role that could have cemented her as Disney's next iconic princess. While Andrew tried to respect the story's legacy, Rachel openly mocked the timeless love tale that had made the original Snow White beloved across generations. Her portrayal was reimagined not as a fairy tale romance but as a story of a strong, independent woman who needed neither a prince nor a love story at all. For Disney executives, this radical departure may have sounded modern and progressive on paper, but for the fans who cherished the 1937 classic, it felt like betrayal.
Folks. I just got back from dinner. I also talked to Sis on the phone for like an hour because today was the March on Broadway and she is such an incredible leader.
The backlash was swift and unforgiving. What Rachel described as empowerment, audiences across the world saw as arrogance, an attempt to rewrite a fairy tale that had been a cornerstone of Disney's brand for nearly a century. Her words alienated fans, irritated her co-stars, and created division even inside Disney itself. Instead of uniting audiences around a magical remake, Rachel's interviews became lightning rods for controversy, with her political remarks and dismissive tone sparking outrage online. Very quickly, the Snow White remake stopped being just another underperforming film. It evolved into a full-blown Hollywood cautionary tale. Within weeks, more than 1,200 theaters had dropped the movie. Box office trackers revealed that screenings were often selling only 3 tickets in total, with daily averages plummeting to around $53, numbers so disastrous that theater owners simply could not justify keeping it on their schedules. For Disney, the situation was catastrophic. A movie meant to extend their billion-dollar live-action remake empire had instead become symbolic of its collapse. The humiliation spread in every direction. Disney executives, who had once hailed Rachel as their rising star, began distancing themselves from her public image. Her own co-stars reportedly refused to defend her in interviews, recognizing that attaching themselves to her controversies might damage their own careers. Gal Gadot, who played the evil queen, gave guarded responses when asked about the film's failure, hinting at problems behind the scenes without directly naming Rachel. According to insiders, Disney had even pressured Gadot to defend Rachel publicly, but she flatly refused, recognizing that the actress's controlling behavior and inflammatory remarks had poisoned the entire project. The financial toll was equally staggering. Snow White cost Disney roughly $250 million to produce, and despite aggressive global marketing, it managed to scrape together only about $195 million worldwide. That left the studio staring down estimated losses of $145 million, a sum large enough to fund multiple mid-budget original films. Instead of serving as another easy billion-dollar remake, Snow White is now ranked among the most expensive mistakes in modern Hollywood history. But the consequences stretch beyond a single movie. Disney's entire remake strategy is now in jeopardy. For years, the studio relied on reimagining animated classics as live-action spectacles, turning nostalgia into guaranteed profit. Yet the Snow White disaster has forced Disney to slam the brakes. The cancellation of Tangled, which was rumored to be the most expensive remake ever attempted, proves that even Disney is finally realizing the dangers of alienating audiences. What was once their safest strategy now looks like their riskiest gamble. Meanwhile, Rachel Zegler's career has been left in tatters. Her reputation is increasingly toxic, her interviews mocked across social media, and her name tied to one of Disney's greatest failures. What was supposed to be her crowning achievement has instead become a symbol of how arrogance, divisive politics, and poor creative decisions can destroy not just one actress's career, but an entire studio strategy. In the end, the Snow White remake is no longer seen as just a movie, it's remembered as a warning. A warning to studios about ignoring their audiences, to actors about letting arrogance overshadow humility, and to corporations about chasing politics over storytelling. What was meant to be a fairytale revival has instead turned into a nightmare, leaving Disney scrambling to rebuild its reputation and Rachel Zegler fighting to salvage a career that may already be beyond repair. Rachel Zegler's career trajectory has taken a surprisingly sharp and unforgiving turn in a very short span of time. Once celebrated as a breakthrough talent after her widely praised performance in West Side Story, she was positioned by Hollywood insiders and Disney executives as one of the industry's next big leading ladies. However, the fallout from Snow White has shifted the narrative almost entirely. Instead of moving upward, she now finds herself in a precarious situation, with her reputation overshadowed by controversy and her career prospects clouded with uncertainty. Some reports even claim that studio insiders quietly discussed abandoning the project altogether once early backlash began, and her performance in the film has only accelerated those concerns. Industry insiders now say that major studios are becoming increasingly hesitant to place her in high-profile productions. The reasoning goes beyond box office disappointment. There are growing fears surrounding her press tour behavior, where she often veers off script, makes divisive remarks, and alienates large segments of the audience. Equally troubling are reports from behind the scenes that suggest she has had difficulty working harmoniously with co-stars and production staff, creating a perception that she is more of a liability than an asset. This starkly contrasts with Disney's expectations that Snow White would be a unifying family blockbuster, something audiences would embrace with the same enthusiasm they showed for faithful remakes like The Lion King and Aladdin, both of which grossed over $1 billion globally. Instead, theaters screening Snow White were left mostly empty, with families and fans choosing to spend their time and money elsewhere on films that either stayed true to beloved source material or offered genuinely fresh storytelling. This rejection points to a deeper problem for Disney, the potential long-term damage to its live-action remake strategy. If Snow White's collapse represents a broader shift in audience sentiment, then Disney's previously reliable formula of reimagining classics may no longer guarantee success at the box office. For Rachel Zegler personally, the road ahead looks challenging. While Hollywood has seen its share of comebacks, few actors have successfully rebounded from a failure of this magnitude, especially when paired with ongoing public relations controversies. Her alleged controlling behavior during production and her dismissive comments about the fairy tale's legacy during interviews